Now, I think a lot of people are a lot more anxious generally than we used to be back in the day, as they say, as my granddad would say. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think this has happened by design, without delving too much into the conspiracy world. Um, and I think this has a lot to do with the fact that we are constantly being bombarded with negative information. The best example is the thing at the moment that's going on in Iran. And there's talk of fuel shortages, and planes soon won't be able to fly because they're running out of aeroplane fuel, and all this doom and gloom kind of stuff. Yeah. Now, I don't want to talk too much about what the news actually is and why it's there, because that's not really what this is about. I have my own take on it, as I'm sure you do. But to sum it up in a nutshell, I think it's there. I think it's a tool that the devil cleverly uses and manipulates to create a spirit of fear inside us, right? And fear is a very powerful tool that the enemy uses, because when we're scared, we've all been scared, we've all been anxious, we've all been worried about things. And when we're worried, when we're scared, we tend to panic. And when we panic, we make silly decisions. We try to get rid of the problem, eliminate the problem as soon as possible. And that can lead us to making some foolish decisions, maybe saying some foolish things, maybe doing things that we later come to regret. Yeah. And again, I don't want to go into the conspiracy realm, in inverted commas. But I think, like I said, I think the news is, and all this information, this constant information bombardment that we all have at our fingertips nowadays, is a clever device, hence why it's called a device, one of the devil's devices, that is used to instill this feeling of fear inside us. And if we're not aware of that, it's very easy to be sucked in and to become fearful and to worry about whatever the news anchor is blabbering on about. And we've seen this time and time again. We've seen it with climate change, scaremongering. We saw it during the Cold War with the threat of nuclear war. We saw it during coronavirus. And like I said, it's not what this channel is about, to analyze those things in depth. I have my own take on it, as I'm sure you do. But that's not what this is about. Those topics are for other channels and for other times. But it's very, very rare, if you've ever noticed. Have you ever wondered, you never really see anything positive on the news, do you? You never hear a story of a local person who, I don't know, overcame cancer, or, who's just had a baby, or it's very, very rare. I genuinely can't think of one instance where I've watched the news or, read the news online, which I very rarely do nowadays. I try to switch off from it and disassociate myself from it as much as possible. But it's very, very rare that happens, if it happens at all. And keeping us in this constant state of fear, this constant state of worry, is really, really damaging for the spirit and the psyche. And that would be my message today, is to be aware of this. We don't really know what's going on. They will only show us snippets of information that they want us to see. Yeah. And it's also something that we, if we're being honest, that we have absolutely no control over or influence over. So why should we worry about it? Yeah. Now, at no point in the Bible did God say, worry or fear or be anxious. Not one instance. There's I can't think of the exact passage, but there's the passage about, do the birds worry about finding food? Do the foxes worry about finding shelter? Because God provides for them, and God provides for us too. And what the news, I think, is trying to do, in my humble opinion, is to turn us away from that, is to turn us away from this reliance on God and Jesus, and to make us fearful, to make us worry about the next war or the next virus or the next disaster or the next shortage of this, that and the other. Yeah? So try to come away from that if you can. You know, I stopped engaging with the news about 6 years ago in 2020 during a certain event, and I haven't missed it one single bit. You know, because now when I worry, which I do for my sins, I know I shouldn't, but I do. It's human to worry. You know, when I worry, when I'm confronted with something, I place it into God's hands. Yeah, that's what we should do. Just place it all into God's hands. Yeah, you weren't supposed to fight this battle alone. Whatever it is that you're facing. You know, you could be looking for a new job, you could be ill, you could be having problems at home, in your relationships or with your children, you know, but these things were sent to try us, yeah? And the more we realise that God's in control of everything, the less we can worry, because if God's on our side, then who really can be against us? Yeah, I personally at the moment, I'm in a situation where I need a bit of guidance from above. I need God to show me the way, and I know that he will, but in his own timing and in his own way. Yeah, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be proactive in a way. You know, we should always try to help ourselves in a way, but just remember, God never ever said fear or be worried. There are countless instances in the Bible that say, do not fear. Yeah, do not be anxious, for I am with you. Yeah. So I know it's easier said than done, and I don't want this to come across as a lecture in any way. It's not. It's just me talking into my phone, using the resources that I have at my disposal to try and spread the word and make people a little bit more aware. Yeah. So I hope wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you're facing, even if you've never done it before, try it today for the first time. Would just be my suggestion to you. Put it into God's hands and see what happens. Okay. God bless.